Okay, so firstly, I apologise that I'm not John Hare. That is something that I can't do anything about, but I'm hopefully here to give you a bit of an insight about how I got into the games industry and giving you a series of guidelines about how to do that. So, I have called this talk 10% Inspiration. The reason I've done that is so often you get this overwhelming idea that you have this single moment that defines your career and the doors open up for you and all these opportunities come flooding in. And I assure you that isn't necessarily true. For some people it is, for most people it isn't. The reason why I've called it 10% inspiration is Thomas Edison once said that success is 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. I am very, very, very much of the 90% inspiration category. Sorry, 90% perspiration category even. If I was 90% inspiration, I'd be getting paid a lot more. So, this idea of I didn't fail, I just found 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb. The reason why I've put this in is today you will hear lots of people talking about lots of different ways to get into the games industry. There is not one single way to get into the games industry. There are hundreds of different ways, through different channels, through meeting different people, through talking to different people that will open up to you as you go through your career. And the main thing is that once you're in the industry, this doesn't all stop. This then becomes a crucial part of progressing your career, talking to people, keeping up to date with things, and making sure that your ideas, progress and that you're talking to people all the time. So, who am I? I am a producer at Flix Interactive. This is what I do. I shout and yell at people. I don't really, but that's what a lot of people think producers do. We make resplendent games. We make great games, and we want to go through the idea of making AAA games in an indie setting. That's what we set out to do. So, as a producer, how did I feel when I first got into the games industry? I felt I was a terrible manager, and I still feel I am today. And this is a really, really, really key point, is when you leave university, you've got 3 years of knowledge kind of crammed into your head, and you're convinced that you know exactly what you need to go into the industry. Now, one of the key things is every single incredible member of a team I've worked with that is exceptional at what they do thinks they are terrible. That doesn't mean they are terrible. It just means that they're constantly trying to progress and constantly trying to improve on themselves. People who believe they know everything tend to stay where they are. But I will always strive to be better. That's something that I've always maintained. So, this is just a little outline of what I've learned. So if I could talk to myself, when I started out in the games industry, these are the things that I'd like to kind of tell myself. So, you guys, I presume, unless you've got the wrong room, want to go into an established studio. There is no golden ticket. There is no key thing that studios look for. There is no single golden ticket that will guarantee you a job in any studio in the world. Different studios want different things, and that's okay. One of the best things to do, look into studios, look at what they do, what kind of games they produce. Is that something you're interested in? Is that something you're not? Always think about what value you can add. Now, this is an interesting one, because when I talk to people, they say, how can I fit into a game studio? How can I adapt how can I adapt to my behavior to make sure that I'm 100% employable? Weirdly, how I actually got my first job in the industry was I actually ended up putting a business case together for the studio that I'm at now. And I actually said, this is what I think I can offer. This is how much I need to survive. If you let me prove to you that I can do what I want to do, you can take me on. If you think I'm terrible, we'll go our separate ways, and I won't take it personally. So this is one thing that I always say to people. When you're looking to get into industry, think about what you can add to a studio. Even if that's huge studios, the majority of you, I presume, will start off in smaller studios, kind of smaller, mid-sized studios, and then move through to larger studios. But always think about what value you can add. Accept criticism. This is a really key thing. So many people that I meet are full of beans, wonderful at what they do, and then the second there is the slightest criticism, they become very defensive. The games industry is very much an industry of iteration. You will always be asked to redo everything you do. You will never, or very, very, very rarely, ace it first time, show it to an art director, a producer, a games designer, and have them go, yep, that's the answer, 100% genius. So learn to accept criticism, and often, I would actually say pursue criticism, ask for critique. You want people to find holes in your work. Approach every challenge with an open mind. This sounds very airy-fairy and hippie, but the idea is that when you work in an industry that changes as often as the games industry, and any aspect of the creative industry, you always have to have an open mind because things will always change. You will have established ways of working that will inevitably change. At some point, what you do will fundamentally change. So, take responsibility for everything and credit for nothing. This is a really key thing. When you think of kind of small independent studios, what often happens is you're part of a small team of very, very, very intelligent, very talented people. And you have to be part of taking responsibility for what you do, but taking credit for nothing. It's always part of the team. You've always got to make sure that the team is taking the credit. This is more from my perspective than anyone else's. The idea of looking after people and the team looks after themselves. Again, this sounds like some kind of hippie mantra, but it is genuinely true. If you look after people, if you ask people how they are, make sure that's the first question you ask people on a day-to-day. Don't say, what are you working on? Because fundamentally, what they're working on is fine. They know what they're working on. How they're feeling will affect your studio and them in a way far beyond what they're working on. Because if they're having a bad day, that is only going to perpetuate. Negativity perpetuates through a studio and positivity perpetuates through a studio. So just make sure you're talking to people, know how they feel. This is a crucial thing. You can say no to jobs. I'm not going to say the company that I was involved in, for obvious reasons, but I took the first job that was offered to me. This was a few years back now, before I got to Flix Interactive, and it was not right for me. But at the time, I felt I had to do it because it was the only job I could find. It was the only job I was offered. This turned out to be more of a negative than a positive. So what I tend to find is because you've spent so long looking for that opportunity, you've spent so long, waiting for that offer to be on the table, that you just, you snatch it straight away. It's not always the best thing to do. Obviously, I understand there's circumstances where people need to earn money, but always remember you can say no to jobs. And you will learn more in a year in industry than ever before. And that is not to belittle any education you've had so far, at all. What you learn at university is huge. What you learn in school is huge, even from primary level. You will apply those things every day. But the application of those lessons into a work environment is something very few people can prepare you for. QA is the back door to the games industry, not always true. The reason I say this is I remember being where you guys are now, 3 or 4 years ago, a little bit longer, and everybody was saying, go into QA, it's the back door into the games industry. Now, I wanted to be a producer, which makes me weird, because nobody wants to be a producer, or very few people want to be a producer. People want to be games designers, artists, and all that kind of stuff. Weirdly, I wanted to be a producer. So the bit of advice I always heard was QA is the back door into the games industry. If you want to get into the games industry, get a QA job. Now, I know a few people who've gone into QA jobs and are really good at what they do. So they are never leaving that job because they are so good at it. Because fundamentally, if you're amazing at a job in a studio, people don't want to move you out. That's not always true, but just from talking to kind of people I know in industry who are in QA, if they're good at it, they tend to be locked into QA. So what I would say is, just to, from my own perspective, my bit of advice would be, if you want to be an artist, try and get a job as an artist, no matter how junior, because you'll be working on your craft, you'll be working on what you want to work on. So, graduate portfolios. Is there anybody in here who's an artist? Yeah, so there's a few of you. Okay. No anime and no superheroes, please. The amount of portfolios I see that are full of anime, and you know, I love anime as much as the next person. It's very groovy, but the idea that the amount of portfolios I get through every day that are full of anime is just surreal. And again with superheroes, artists making Batman. I love Batman. I had the Batman theme tune played at my wedding, right? I don't want to hire people who can make Batman because I don't work for Rocksteady, and the license would cost a lot of money. So the reason I say this isn't just kind of a sweeping statement. It's if you're an artist, define what you're good at, define your style, because that's what's going to get you through the door. If you have a mind-blowing style that makes a game designer look at that and go, I want to make a game that looks like that, that's infinitely better than, you know, drawing Batman versus the Joker in a Jim Lee style. So, you know, bless you. So this is a really key thing, defining your style, and then because also showing a variety of styles, because that variety of styles will land you a job far more readily. Show understanding of your art. The reason I say this is, again, I see a lot of finished work. Now, finished work is great, but it's very easy to hide bad lines. It's very easy to kind of cover things up. If you're an animator, if you're a 3D character artist, whatever aspect of art you come from, if you show an understanding of the art, it's far easier to teach people tools than it is to teach people the art. So if you can show life drawing, you know, these kind of very basic skills, showing tonal differences, that's going to far more easily land you a job than, you know, finished amazing pieces. Because like I say, you can teach people tools. The art is far more difficult to learn. Appreciate the application of process. What I mean by that is people, again, you know, they understand their process and what they do, but how is that applied in the environment they're in? I know incredible sculptors, I know incredible artists, but they don't think about how they fit into the studio as a whole. Show knowledge of pipelines. Showing knowledge of pipelines and this is 2 points all in one really, and your relationship between the other people in the studio is a very crucial thing. You know, and this is for coders. I meet so many coders who are incredible coders, but don't think about how that code fits in with art. I'm not suggesting go off and make a whole game, but even just think about it, think about the process, research the process, research what is needed to bring that game together. Actively seek constructive criticism. This will keep coming up because you need that feedback. Anybody, any artist, any programmer, anyone who works in isolation will do one of two things. They will convince themselves they're a genius, or they'll convince themselves they're terrible. This is why you need to seek input at every possible, every time you can, whether it's friends, but make sure they're not too worried about offending you. Always have a pedant look over it. We received a CV into the studio from a student who the first line was, "I'm writing to inform you." Writing was spelt with an R, not with a W. If you can't get the first line of that CV right, that is a level of attention to detail that we can't really accept. Don't be proud. My dad is the most pedantic person in the world. I used to hate him when I was a kid. But he used to look over everything and pull up all the spelling mistakes. I'm now 27. I create pitch documents for internationally renowned publishers, and I don't send him it all, but I'll say, how will do I put the apostrophe here, or, do I put it after the S or before the S? And these are the kind of things where never be too ashamed to seek help, because having a pedant look over things is never bad. So, bagging your first job, everybody picks up their pads. Don't care about you, tell us how to get a job. So this is just a series of kind of pointers, guidelines that I've thought were crucial in getting me a job in the industry. So the first thing is learn to love networking. It's essential. If you say to people, I'm not really big at talking to people, I'm not really a big fan of that, that's all well and good, but you will have to learn to be able to talk to people, especially if you want to work in a studio. The conversational nature of a studio is a crucial part of the day-to-day operation of a studio. The majority of studios you go into will run Agile Scrum methodologies that will mean every morning you have to stand in front of a group of your peers, discuss what you're working, what you're doing, what the problems are. So, you have to learn to be able to speak effectively, communicate with others, but all of that is so crucial when it comes to networking. And like I say, this isn't something that disappears when you get a job. This actually becomes even more crucial when you get a job, because you're talking to clients, you're talking to prospective publishers, whatever it may be. This is something that's really crucial. So learn to love it. Be persistent. Hard work beats natural talent 9 times out of 10. I know so many incredible naturally talented people who don't have jobs, who are absolutely phenomenal, but they are waiting for someone to stumble across their website and go, my God, your work's incredible, please come and work for me. That is not going to happen. You have to chase people, you have to follow things up, you really have to kind of push for it. Always take the initiative. This kind of ties into the previous point, where so often I have people who say, I've built a website, but no one's looking at it, I don't understand. Well, are you telling people it's there? Are you using social networking or whatever aspect, of your social networking arsenal to try and get people to look at it? And so often, people kind of go, no, I just thought people would stumble across it, If I Google it, it comes up top. It's because it's your website. Google finds things to do with you first. If you say you'll do something, do it. I meet people at conferences all the time, students at conferences all the time, and they say, I'll drop you an email, I'll send you my portfolio. I've had 2 sent to me in all that time, and I must have talked to, at a guess, a couple of thousand. I have a couple of mentors in the industry who've been in the industry a long time. One of them I met at a talk very similar to this. He just started in the games industry 5 years before that. I got his card and I sent him an email every week. I said, I'm going to send him an email every week, just updating it. And until he tells me to go away, I'm going to keep doing that. And he's given me more advice, helped me more than anyone else. Because we've all been in the same place. We want to help people. I want to help students into their first jobs. That's what I want to do. Because I've been in your position. I know how annoying and frustrating it is. Learn to survey the industry. This is a very, very, very key point that is very often overlooked. How many of you go onto games websites each day? Everyone. Hands up who are IGN, Kotaku, or, let me think. Yeah, those kind of things. That's good. So there's not too many of you. Right. My biggest bit of advice is stop looking at consumer websites and look at industry websites. So often I have people coming up to me and saying, I go on IGN, try and keep on top of things. Gamma Sutra, Develop, MCV, GamesIndustry.biz. This is probably stuff that's been, bashed into you by your lecturers. That means they're doing their job. Because if you survey your industry and learn how to find patterns, look where the industry is going to be just over the horizon, kind of 1-2 years down the line, that is a huge, huge thing. It was a skill that I learned to do on my MA, and it actually allowed me to come up with a concept for a comic book that we're now using in a pitch. So that was 2 years ago, and we're now using it in a commercial environment. So it goes to show surveying works. Balance practicality versus aspiration. The reason I say this is, again, during my MA, I worked at Blockbusters. I've worked in Game Station, and it is very frustrating wanting to be part of an industry and having to work in retail or coffee shops or these kind of things that you have to do as a student. My worry is I've seen far too many of my friends who are immensely talented people becoming amazing baristas and worse 3D artists. If you want to be a 3D artist, if you want to be a programmer, if you want to be a developer, spend time being good at what you do and developing that skill. Because every minute you spend in a part-time job or a full-time job, you are falling further and further behind the people who are doing it full-time. If you can make a living, even if it is just making ends meet, doing what you want to do that every time. Because you don't want to be a 3D artist working in Blockbusters, 20, 30 years down the line, which is, I've met those people. And it's just make sure you get that balance right. So, this is my kind of last bit of advice. This is my big one. So often I meet the most cocksure students who come in, they're just looking at me going, like you, like me. Cocksure students who essentially kind of go, yep, I'm going to be a games designer, I'm going to make the next, amazing game. And that's all well and good, and you might be that person, but chances are you're not. And I don't mean that to offend you, I'm just trying to prepare you realistically. The chances are games design is a job that will be 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. There aren't many studios that you can go into with a character art portfolio and go, but I do have a games design idea, do you mind if I just show you it? Which I've had happen. It's like, well, that's really cool, but we're making a game and we want you to work on it. It's very surreal. So be humble, accept the fact that you don't know everything, and that's okay. Like I said at the beginning, I'm a terrible manager. Because the second I think I'm a great manager, the second I think I know everything, that's where I've shot myself in the foot. Because then I stop learning. The best managers I've ever had have been people who constantly read about what they do, constantly look up where things are going, find out about people, because people change far less often than the industry. The industry changes constantly. I mean, if you'd have said 5-10 years ago that Nintendo would be really struggling to make sales, people would have thought you were insane. They are really struggling to make sales. So, you can't predict where the industry is going all the time, but learning how to talk to people, learning how to, this is going to turn into a sermon, but being kind of kind and groovy with each other is always a good thing, because those are the things that will progress you in your career. So, this kind of ties into the idea of being humble, but this was something that somebody told me when I met them up at a conference in Edinburgh when I was about 21, and he stood for about half an hour outside a hotel in Edinburgh and just gave me advice. And he kept saying, and this is one thing I will reiterate to you now, this is not the golden ticket. Don't take notes and go, right, that's how I get a job. This is just my perception, this is my perspective. We've got Ian from Aardvark Swift coming up. He'll tell you a much more general view. I'm just giving you my advice, my perspective. But this was one thing that I found really interesting. It's something that I quoted to a lot of people. It always pays to give people time, because you never know which side of the desk you'll be on next time. This guy spent half an hour talking to me, and at the same conference I was told I was a kid and I knew nothing by a guy from a company that went bust 2 weeks later. A divine irony and rather hilarious. But this was Peter Moore. If people don't know who Peter Moore is, he is a seriously big guy in the games industry. He runs EA Sports in Canada. This guy runs a studio that turns over more money than 10 studios put together. And he was so humble. And I don't really care if he meant it or not. just the fact that he put himself across that way means that, let me think, 5 years later, I'm in a room telling people about the humility of this guy. That's good PR, but also it's good for him because he doesn't know which side of the desk he could be on. I don't think I'm going to be running EA anytime soon. And the last one is, this is where it gets really, I'm going to start lighting candles and everybody can start singing Kumbaya in a second. Approach each and every individual as an equal. You have something to learn from everyone. And the person who said this was my granddad. And I do that, and I try and do that with absolutely everybody I meet. I've learned some incredible things from students, and people will stand here and dictate, over and over again about how you get into the games industry, how the games industry works. The fact of the matter is, you're the people who define how the games industry works because you're the future of it. If you all turn around and say, no, actually, I think a studio should be run like this, then that's how studios are going to be run. It might take a while, but that's what's going to happen because fundamentally, you are, the workforce of the games industry. So often you will have those experiences like I had in Edinburgh where I was told I was a kid and I knew nothing. You will be told these things. Be humble, be calm, don't get offended, don't get upset. Because again, you don't know which side of the desk you're going to be sat on. And 3 years down the line after you've, told somebody to stuff off and, thrown a bottle at them, they could be sitting on the other side of the desk, trying to interview you. So just be calm, be humble, and remember you can learn something from everyone because that is a huge, huge thing. Thank you very much for your time. Cheers.